Power Producers Shop Talk, where we are refining and redefining the sales game by equipping you with the tools you need to differentiate yourself in the marketplace.
Listening to the podcast is only going to get you so far. Why not take your game to the next level? Check out Power Producer Basecamp on killingcommercial.com today.
Tactical skills that'll help you provide deliverable value to your clients and prospects.
Want to have the sweet swag that we send out from the Power Producers podcast for your clients and employees? Check out policyt.com today.
And action items that you can provide to take your prospects and clients to the next level.
Want to create an online presence but don't know how to start? Check out crushingcontent.com. It's done for you, so all you have to do is show up.
This is Power Producer Shop Talk, production redefined. Are you ready to feel the power?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. Today, we are going to talk about something every producer cares about, and that is commissions. And I'm not going to talk about it. I brought the person who handles that for us to talk about it, and that is Crystal Temple Frawley from the Pemberley Group, a bookkeeping service that we hired a couple of years ago, and the endorsed provider by the Killing Commercial community and all things that I touch. You're going to hear a lot of noise out there in the marketplace of people who think they can do it better, but I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's exactly what that is, noise, which means unwanted sound. So if you're going to tune in to what we're going to talk about, and we're going to get into agency bill, commission reconciliation, and probably, if I know how the conversation's going to go, some level of technology discussion about things we see that are happening right now that could be coming to fruition pretty quickly. But I'm not going to talk anymore because we were yakking for 20 minutes before I ever hit record. So I'm going to let Crystal take it away. Crystal, take just a second to introduce yourself and give everybody your background, and then we'll take off and run with it.
Yeah, thanks, David. So for those that don't know me, I've actually been in insurance accounting about 20 years. It is something I have loved since the day I started doing this. Worked for several agencies in-house at retail agencies. Moved up, started doing different things, started really working in back office operations. Accounting was always on my plate. And then in 2016, I started seeing this need for outsourced bookkeeping for agencies. There were a few firms around. None of them really focused on a little bit smaller agencies, less than 25 employees. And so I decided to take a leap and try it. And by 2017, I had left my full-time job at a retail agency just to focus on that firm. And then a year after that, I sold that bookkeeping firm to an AMS provider, and went back to a retail agency, got a lot of experience with M&A. I think I've sat through and been a part of about 100 acquisitions. And then I was still feeling I needed to continue this path. So stepped back on this path, a few years ago with the Pemberley Group. And now we are management system agnostic. So we have clients that are on multiple different management systems, everything from Epic to 360, Hawksoft, EasyLinks, QQ, now Certs. We support all of them. And we, to your point, David, accounting, bookkeeping, right? That's what we focus on. We do operating, trust, and commissions for insurance agencies, and that's all we do. I think we have just a handful of clients that are kind of right on the outskirts of the retail space. We have a user group or a couple of other providers, like I said, that are right next to the insurance agency space, but otherwise we're exclusive to insurance agencies.
I think that's important to note too for everybody, because it's just the accounting inside of agencies is so unique and potentially complicated that you have to have somebody that specializes in it. I don't know any other way to put it. If you're using, your generic QuickBooks Pro or going to Fiverr thinking you're going to find somebody to do this, probably not going to end up with the best results.
No, and probably a lot of cleanup that we're going to have to do after that too. If I'm honest, we get a lot of cleanup from like local bookkeepers or actually QuickBooks Live. They push their product very hard, but they are not insurance specialists, and it shows in their work product.
So talk about what it looks like when you engage with an agency. I think that's something that people would want to hear about, because I know that one of the things that I always mention when I'm talking with other agencies about why it would be good for them to meet you and hear how you operate is some of the technology that you've leveraged to make our lives a whole lot easier, even though sometimes some of us don't always comply as timely as we should. And I'll take full responsibility for that. But I think it's pretty cool that, just for example, the email that we get where there's something that needs to be classified and it doesn't happen automatically. And we know that we need to go in and just click a link, sign in, and we can assign the different categories to transactions or give you a brief explanation of what it is. And, it saves so much time to be able to do that instead of having to jump on a Zoom or a phone call and walk through item by item every single time. That in and of itself is a huge benefit to me that reduces the friction in getting that stuff done.
Yeah, so one of the things that we really try to take a look at, and I'll start by saying this, there's I think we're doing well, but we always try to improve. So every time we onboard a client, we're tweaking our processes, right? We're saying, hey, this is really working well, this isn't working well, and we try to improve with every new client that we get. But yeah, so the technology is huge for us. When I first started doing this, 10 years ago, the technology really wasn't there. We had email, we had things like Dropbox, and ShareFile and different things like that. You could suspend stuff to us in the management system, but there was no true like real time interaction where we could come back and like I said, hey, what is this transaction, without sending it via email. It's very inefficient. It absolutely clutters your inbox. So when we did it this time, it was okay, this is the first thing that we're going to do. How can we communicate with our agencies and get the information that we need on their timeline, but making sure that it's an easy process. So one of the first things we did implement was our recap feature. So as David, you mentioned, you get an email that says, hey, there's some stuff to do, and you log into your portal, and then you have this list of transactions that we may need some documentation, or would just tell us what it is. We'll recategorize it. And within that same portal, if we have a task list for you. So for example, I need a commission statement from this carrier because it didn't download and we haven't seen it. It's a task list that you can just check off. Within that portal, you can comment back. No, this is contingency commission, or it's a reimbursement, or hey, here's the attachment, all within one single portal. And that has been huge for us because it also, and this, it sends you reminders if you haven't completed it, right?
Yes.
I don't have to do that anymore. So we're still tweaking those processes.
Sadly, Crystal, I know about the reminders. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's big for us because then that feeds back into our system. I get a notification that says David just completed these, these tasks or uploaded documents, and then our team can go in and grab them and finish the process. One thing that we're looking at now is how do we make that even better, right? How do we improve that process even more? So some of the things that we've started implementing is, as soon as I upload financials in the portal, it's going to send you an email that says, hey, David, they're done. Let's go ahead and get our meeting scheduled to chat about them. And so, like I said, we're continuing to improve every single time we complete a task. But as part of the onboarding, we're finding out what systems are you using. I'm working with an agency right now. They've been with us about a month. It was a very fast onboarding because someone in their office had quit, and no one there knew how to do anything that needed to be done. So it was a very weird onboarding. We didn't have our normal ramp up time. And I spoke with them yesterday, and it is now, please just do everything for us. Like this, you've done so well. Let's just do everything now. So that onboarding was a little unique. But our processes served us well. We were able to get in there, quickly adapt, figure out what they needed, and we have a meeting on Monday to completely revamp their accounting processes, to be more efficient and to eliminate a lot of double work. And those things really do matter.
Absolutely. So when you get into these agencies that have been with QuickBooks Online, I mean, obviously, you and we talked. You were on the killer call here earlier this week, but agency bill and commission reconciliation really seems to be like the real hot buttons in the places where it's sort of like when I go in and do a risk assessment for a manufacturer. I know where the low hanging fruit is and where I need to look first. And it feels like it's very much the same in the bookkeeping world when you go in and do the same, right?
It is. Yeah. So one of the first things that we will typically do when we have a new client is we'll do a commission audit. So we'll go back and look maybe the past 6 to 12 months, depending on the size of the agency, and we'll see what was reconciled, what was not reconciled. Did commission reports go out with no producers assigned? We do this kind of internal quick audit to see if there's anything that we can immediately change or need to change. I had one client that came on board with us, and unfortunately, we realized that a significant number of commission statements had been reconciled, but the agency had never received the money. And I can't even begin to tell you how big of a problem that is. So, for us, we're not reconciling a statement without the money. It's unless you tell us to, which is rare. We're just not going to do that. And when we let you know immediately, we'll say, I'll send you something, through our portal that says, these 8 statements are sitting here, they downloaded, there's no money. We probably need to call the carrier. And in that particular situation, it was very real. It wasn't just a check sitting on a desk somewhere. The money had not come to the agency. So we do those audits, and that was work way before we ever engaged with them, but we went back and they were able to resolve that and recoup those funds. So it is commissions are tough. Agency bill's tough too. Commissions, I would argue, are actually a little bit tougher. The technology has not been there. I think that
Sounds like literally every other problem the insurance industry needs to
it
solve. The
is.
technology is very rarely there.
It is.
And
And when
sadly,
it
too many insurtechs are out there solving problems that don't exist instead of focusing on the ones who do.
Yeah, or they're solving something that's already been solved. So, I actually will say though, there are a couple companies that in fintech, insurtech space that are finally paying attention to this. And what they're doing, I think, really is moving the needle. But it's going to take time for that to be widely accepted and utilized. Yeah, and I appreciate that they're listening to me when I tell them what the problems are and how we can fix them and ideas. And um, it's that space is finally changing, and I'm very, very excited for that.
So let's talk a little bit about tech. I mean, obviously you've got the things that you leverage, and people, when I tell you this, Crystal's company's only a couple of years old, and it was obvious to me that she invested in technology to make the process a lot smoother right out of the box. And it's only gotten better over time, but there's still a lot of things out there that need to be addressed. And I think that tech is certainly part of it. But I'm also interested in your perspective because I feel like with the accounting piece, it's really similar to a lot of what we see on the actual insurance placement side, where we have really good partners like Blue Pond AI that are out there that can do policy review or contract review or match the two to each other and see where deficiencies are. And, really, really cool stuff to see. But there's still a human component that has to be there to review that stuff. And I think that accounting's probably no different because, you can use AI or robotic process automation to help you automate some of these tasks. It's easy to kind of match data sets and things like that to use a computer, but there still has to be some level of human review that's involved. And I think it's not just because that I don't think it's because or RPA doesn't pick up everything. I think also part of it is that when you have an agency principal that's entrusting you with their single biggest asset in many cases, they want to have the peace of mind that the person actually touched, felt, and reviewed that information before they signed off on it.
Yeah, so we used phenomenal example. So an RPA, a bot to run out and crawl a carrier website to grab a commission statement for me. That's an easy sell for me. I will absolutely utilize that technology. That same technology going in and analyzing this data and telling an agency some metrics on it, maybe. But when it comes to things like, okay, process improvements, hey, by the way, we're seeing month over month, you had a 5% decrease in this carrier. We need to talk, right? What is this? What's going on? Those are the things where, because I didn't have to go pull a commission statement, I now have time to have that conversation, and I can look at it. I can look at these exceptions and say, hey, you're missing a statement, or hey, do you see that you're having this consistent drop, 1 to 2%, 3% month over month? That's going to add up very quickly. Let's take note. Well, I have time to do that again, because I'm not personally crawling going to find some statement somewhere. So that is one way that we have utilized this technology. And these things take training, right? Their carrier website specific and things like that. We just plug in the credentials. But then you have other options in the technology, and this is what's so exciting. You get in technology that's using these large language models, right? You're feeding these commission statements into it, and they're able to come back and say, here's something that's ingestible for your management system. That is a game changer for us. Even something as simple as, here's a PDF that's OCR, it's an image, right? It's a picture. It's not a text PDF. Those are the most difficult statements to convert. You generally can't convert those with your typical PDF converters and Adobes, but to be able to give me something back that I can then put into EasyLinks or to Hawksoft or to Epic that is ingestible as is, that is huge. I have one statement that, because of this technology, it went from a full day for my staff to reconcile this statement, or not even to convert this statement, into about 3 to 4 minutes. Again, those are the things that are moving the needle. And that technology is there. It takes training and it takes time on the front end, but it's there and it's working.
So I'm an agency in small town USA, and I'm the agency principal, and my wife's just handled the books for me because that's the way that it's always been. What should agencies be looking for to determine whether or not it makes sense for them to outsource services, number one? And then number two, if you put on your hat on the other side of the table and you were an agency principal, what would be the things that you would be looking at that you would want to be comfortable with to hire a bookkeeping service like the Pemberley Group?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. And if we're talking about what's that pivotal point where you need to start looking for someone, there's a couple things, and they sound a little sarcastic and snarky, but I think they're very true. Um, you're spending more time deciphering spreadsheets than you are selling insurance. You're spending more time trying to find a commission statement than you are investing in thought leadership in your company. And that sounds like a super easy answer, but if you really sat down and were intentional for 1 month and tracking the amount of time that you are focusing on bookkeeping, whether it's issuing a check, reconciling commissions, whatever it may be, if you find that that was actually more time than what you spent building your business, it's a no-brainer. You need to be doing it.
I think the other thing too is, and I don't mean to interrupt, but my ADHD will make me forget this question if I don't. I think the other thing is, agency principals can be short-sighted in that they're looking at it as, well, it's going to cost me X number of dollars a month when I can do it for this much here. And while that might be the case, that you can save a little bit on the payroll side, what's going to happen when all of a sudden the IRS or somebody else comes in and all that payroll savings doesn't look so awesome anymore?
Yeah, and you would not be surprised if I told you the number of agencies where we've had those situations. And I'm the same way, right? If I look at something, my marketing, for example, I could certainly go and do my own social media. I could do my own marketing for this business or any of the other businesses that I have. But my time is quite valuable. And again, this sounds, I think you and I both sound like broken records on this, but as an owner, as a founder, as a producer, whatever your role is, your time has value. And I would much rather spend my free time doing things that feel like investment in my family, investment in my business and its future growth. I think we forget that piece. I can certainly sit down and create some social media posts, like I said, for more so for maybe a couple of the other businesses, but my time is quite valuable, and that was a very hard lesson to learn for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that our industry does not do a very good job of preparing people to run agencies. And I'm
Yep.
going to qualify that, in a couple of different ways. Number one, there are people out there who are trying to help producers learn what it looks like to make that move from producer to agency principal. In fact, my friend Miles Merwin has an actual program called Producers to Principals, where he brings people in and goes through operations and all of those other things, and they produce for him while they're there. But the intent always is for them to migrate out, open their own agency, but be ready to do that when the time comes. That's the only program I'm even aware of. And no, that's no disrespect to Miles whatsoever, because his program is absolutely fantastic. And anybody who knows him knows that he is a very process driven individual. But I think the other thing that's interesting to me, and I don't know, maybe it's just personal experience, but I've had this conversation with some other people as well. I think sometimes if you're a successful producer, you don't feel as if you're wholly fulfilled or have culminated the best or reached a pinnacle of your career unless you make that move. Like, you have to own an agency in order to be perceived as successful in the industry. And the reality is, some of the wealthiest people I know in the industry do not own agencies. They literally are pure producers. They go out, they do it. And if I'm being transparent, that's probably where I should have stayed. To be honest with you, I would much rather go out and deal with that end of things than the operational things. And the operational things end up getting neglected because that's not where my passion is. But I think it's really important for, people that are looking to make that move to think through two things. Number one, why do you want to do it? And number two, if you still decide you want to be an agency principal, what are you doing to prepare yourself for that role so that you're successful when you get there? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into it. And, just hiring people and staffing the agency, making technology decisions, driving business are certainly part of them. But if you don't have the bookkeeping and stuff on the back end, you're gonna be losing sleep every night until it is.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so whether it's us, whether it's any other firm, whether even it's a local firm, there are things that you need to know, you do need to know as an agency principal. You should know, and your bookkeeper should give you access, and there should be transparency there about what they're doing, how they're doing it. But to your point, there's no class you can take on insurance bookkeeping. It doesn't exist. There's no college course. I know in all of my pre-licensing and continuing education classes that I've sat through, they're just not there. So either you have an incredible mentor like I had. I will never ever forget the person who taught me how to do this initially. Her name was Pam, and she was amazing. I still talk to her often. So you have a great mentor. You're scrappy enough just to figure it out, which there's a lot of that in me too. Or you're probably just doing it wrong, or your firm's doing it wrong. So the biggest there's two things that I think are important to note. The first one is your budget on this. Expect to spend about 1% of your annual revenue on a bookkeeper. And that can fluctuate a bit based on what they're doing for you. If you have someone where you're doing all the company payables, you're not paying producers, so you're not reconciling commissions, it's going to be lower. And of course, if the firm's doing everything, it may be just a tad higher. But expect around 1%, and don't be offended by that number. That should be roughly in line with where you're at. And if it's not, then that's a conversation to have. And then there's questions. If you, again, whether it's us, and you can ask us these questions all day long and we will answer them. But if you do look at an outsourced bookkeeper, there are things you need to ask them. The first, and just be very, very direct with them. How familiar are you with specific accounting regulations and compliance requirements, right? Do you know state regulations on commingling of funds? That's a very important question. Every state's different. There are a lot of states that don't have requirements on bank accounts separation. Several do. Ask a bookkeeper, hey, do you actually know what these are? Can I charge agency fees in my state? Those are questions to ask. Another question to see if they're actually engaged in the industry. If a good tell would be if you ask them, what accounting software and more importantly, what additional tech tools do you recommend for insurance agencies, and tell me why. That should give you some great insight on what the relationship's going to be like. There's a couple out there right now. They're actually not advocates for any technology. The work is phenomenal, but they're not leaning into any of this tech. We do, so that may just be a different relationship to
So
have.
I'm literally laughing out loud because you just said that as I'm peering at the abacus lamp over your right shoulder
Yes,
on your background. So
it was groundbreaking for its time.
I know,
right?
but it cracks me up because here we are talking about all this tech, and I keep staring at that thing thinking, I don't have enough hands and feet to figure out how to work that thing anyhow. But
It's funny. I actually have a really decent collection at the house, David. You're quite familiar. I have this medieval hobby, and
oh yeah,
so in my copious amounts of spare time, I actually study medieval business, banking, and bookkeeping. So it's near and dear to my heart. It was probably the most my most favorite birthday present I've ever received. My husband did well.
it's actually really cool, to be honest with you.
It is,
I
yeah,
like
yeah.
it. It definitely. The other thing that I'm looking at, just being completely transparent and speaking to my ADHD, is that ridiculous thing of orchids that you have. Are those real or?
Or not. I am.
Okay, I
I'm
was
very
gonna
good
say
at a
because
lot of
you can't
things,
see them.
but
You can't see them, but every year at Father's Day, my little girl gives me an orchid, and across my window back there, I have live orchids in my office. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, my God, Caroline can never see those because that makes mine look very, very puny.
that was a present to myself when I decided to move my office around a bit. And I had the lamp on one side, and I'm a little unbalanced. I'm sitting a little off balance, but I had to be be the same height. So that was a present to myself. So
So I have to tell you, when you mentioned the medieval thing, when we were in Italy last week, we stayed in the village of Cortona, which is medieval, like legit
oh yeah.
medieval village. 800 people live inside the walls. They do have walls. They are big stone walls with massive medieval wooden doors that they still shut at night to keep people from coming in. And as we were going around, we spent the first couple of days in Rome, then we went to Tuscany and we stayed in Cortona. We went to some really cool wineries. The one winery we went to was founded in 1441. It was in a medieval castle, and that was a really cool experience to see. And then we went to Florence, and we're looking at all this architecture and art and everything else. I'm gonna say a couple of things. Number one, the Vatican, my goodness, it was absolutely gorgeous, but I was all Vaticaned out by the time we left that place because there is just so much there. And at some point, I told Andrea, I'm like, listen, I don't want to be disrespectful about this by any stretch, but at some point, when you've walked around for 3 hours looking at these paintings and tapestries, they all start to look like the same paintings and tapestries. And
Too.
I appreciate they have history behind them, but I tuned that out a long time ago. But the other thing is we were looking at just the architecture and the players that built the different areas over there. I really wish I would have paid more attention in world history when I was in school, because now I actually am interested in this stuff. So as we were flying home, I made a commitment to myself. Well, I didn't know it before I went, so let me get a few books on what I should have read before I went, so that the next time I go back, it may hit a little different. And let's just say that if you want to get into medieval history, you better be ready to read about 700-800 pages per book because they are not thin, easy readers. So I had all of these books delivered from Amazon this last week, and the one that came in yesterday was a biography on Michelangelo, and it legit was 800 pages long.
Yeah. So interesting side notes. This is actually what truly piqued my interest in pursuing this kind of hobby path. So I've been doing insurance accounting about 20 years. It's I don't think anyone, just like an insurance, either you're born into it or you fall into it and then you never leave. Same with accounting. But the basic bookkeeping principles that we utilize today, regardless of technology, it's exactly what they did 1400s, right? So 15th century rolls around. The principles that were published in that textbook by Luca Pacioli, illustrated by Da Vinci, is exactly what we still do. And I don't think any industry, or very few industries, can say that. The principles are so strong. And I teach a class. I'm an adjunct professor at the college here, and I teach a lot of workforce development and entrepreneur series classes. And I lead in with that, right? I'm like, hey, this works. The system works. It's proven, and technology can come and go. It can advance. It can, we can decide to do it on paper. Our results the same. And that's pretty extraordinary. And I'd like to think that gets them engaged, right? This thing that's been around for so long still works. I get very excited about it. Not sure if the students do, but I'm going to tell myself that they do. But yeah, so it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and the other thing is you go over there and it's like we have history in the US, but like this is history with a capital H. It's just it's amazing. So I'm in a geeky way interested in like diving in and understanding, because it's one of the things that I do, and I can do this for hours on end. I consider it to be a personal talent that has been refined over years of flying, but I love watching the Delta flight tracker and then guessing what our miles per hour are, how many miles we are away from our destination. And I will do this every time the screen refreshes just to see how close I can be. But in looking at the map this time, it blew my mind how close. I did not realize how close the heel of the boot of Italy is to Africa. It's amazing. And so when you go to Florence and you go to the leather market and you see people that obviously are not native to Italy that are there, it really speaks to how easy it is to get just across the strait from Africa to Italy. And that's how a lot of this stuff, I suspect I'm going to refresh my learning, got developed, because a lot of the buildings were built with materials that aren't even native to that region that somehow made it in. And then even when you go into like the Catholic churches and they have embalmed bodies that are there on display, which is kind of weird to some degree. I learned that about my wife. Dead bodies freak her out. I'm like, who hadn't seen a dead body? And then now she's freaked out at me. But just the way that they did the embalming and the preservation of that kind of stuff and the influence that's there, it's really interesting to just think of how the beginning of civilization from a Judeo-Christian perspective has migrated up into Europe and then spread out. So I'm anxious to go in and fill in the blanks that I will. Oh yeah, I remember that. But you don't readily recall it. But really, really cool trip.
So right now, my top destination was Germany. I took a solo trip several years ago, and I spent about 3 weeks over there, crashed on a friend's couch. But I went and saw all the things. You
have to, though. You have to go for weeks. Like that's the one thing I can say. Loved every minute of being in Italy. And we were actually 2 years ago when Grayson turned 21. That was his bucket list trip. I took him to Oktoberfest in Munich for the opening. And that was the most Clark Griswold experience I've ever had in my life, because I turned 50 the same year he turned 21. And so I have this thing with my kids. And you know what? This has absolutely nothing to do with insurance people, but it has everything to do with life. And I'm just going to share some wisdom that I've learned over the years and things that I think are really important when you're raising kids. And if you want to tune out, that's great. I would wish that you wouldn't. But, when my boys turned 18, it's really important for me to memorialize that, because that is a defining point in their life. The other defining point is when they move into their teenage years. And I actually read a book called Raising a Modern Day Knight that was written not that long ago about the progression of how people became knights, but the similarities in raising sons, and why pomp and circumstance and ceremony in making things official is so important. And so for me, it was always really important that when the guys turn 18, that we go away together, just the two of us, so that we can have the conversations, and they leave that trip knowing you're no longer a boy, you're now a man, and men act differently than boys. So unfortunately, we had to wait till Grayson was 21 because of COVID. We couldn't travel when he turned 18 or when he was 18. And so I turned 50 the same year he turned 21. We each picked a bucket list trip and said, we're going to do it together. Mama wasn't happy about it, but she let me go anyhow because she always knows that if she does, she gets 10x more on the back end than what she would ever get on the front end. And so we went to Alaska for a week and did fishing, salmon fishing, halibut fishing, and all of that, which was awesome. And that was my choice. Grayson decided he wanted to go to Munich for Oktoberfest, and 21-year-old David probably would have said the same thing. But when we did those, I said, okay, I'm going to plan Alaska, and all you got to do is show up. You plan Munich, I'll pay for it, and all I want to do is show up. Well, guess what? One of us planned our trip, one of us didn't. Alaska went off swimmingly. We get to Munich. We don't have tickets to any tents. We don't have like nothing. And I think he just thought he was going to do what he and I are very much alike, do is just, yeah, we'll figure it out at the last minute. Well, guess what? Somehow we did, because literally we are in Oktoberfest for the grand opening of Oktoberfest, and we had no tickets to get in, but we had made our way into the main tent, and we were standing next to, like legitimately next to the mayor of Munich when he tapped the keg to kick the whole thing off, to the point that I was laying in bed that night watching the news, and we are on TV, and it looked like literally we're in lederhosen, the socks, the shoes, the hats, everything looked just like the Griswold family, completely out of place standing next to the mayor of Munich when he kicked it off. But even when I went over there, it was the same thing. You look at it and you're just in complete disbelief. Any picture that you take, any video that you take does it no justice whatsoever, just for what the experience is, the smells, the things that you feel when you see things. And Italy's the same way. You have to go over for more time because it takes so long to get there that if you don't get it all in that 3 weeks like you did, you may never get it all in because there's other places to go and other things to experience. And I would say that I think the biggest thing that surprised me the most is when we were in Pisa last week, and you walk in and you go through the arch to get into where like everything is in Pisa, where they've got the church and the mausoleum and the leaning towers there, and you walk in and boom, it's just like right there. Like it's not, you don't have to walk anywhere to get to it or anything. It's like boom, right in the middle of the town. We don't have that over here. Maybe Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg to a certain degree, but it's several hundred years behind all of the stuff that was developed over there. And the fact that those things are even still standing, let alone functioning, is just absolutely incredible to me.
It is. And so we actually have, we did this big joint 40th birthday, honeymoon anniversary, this whole big trip. So we're going to Italy in May, and I'm quite excited. Every time you posted something, I sent it or showed it to my husband. I'm like, this is on our list, hon. This is what we're doing.
You know what's funny? You haven't seen anything yet, really.
There's like 3,000 pictures in the Dropbox.
Yeah, we leaked a little bit of it out, but we have over 3,000 pics and videos that we took. Because I mean, you're taking 3 and 4 pictures of the same thing, trying to get the right angle.
Every day.
It's now a workflow.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting too. So raising a modern day knight, that was actually a gift to my son on his 18th birthday, as well. And I hope it's one of his most cherished gifts. There are some incredible men in his life. My uncle, my grandfather, they all really influenced him. So that book is actually quite important. So yeah,
I think it is. And I think it's really important that that people who do invest in their kids, in their families are public about that, because too many people aren't. And the American family, I'm not going to get all philosophical here, but the nuclear family in America today is not what it used to be. And I think we have control over that. We just have to be willing to control it. And a lot of people aren't, because it's not convenient. It's hard. It's really hard. I had a very, very busy day yesterday, but there is not a snowball's chance in hell I was missing having lunch with Caroline at school because she wanted me to be there. And even though it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. I know it would have broken her heart if I didn't show up. Even if Andrea went, if I didn't show up too, it would have really bothered her. And I'm not willing to do that. There is nothing that I do in the agency or otherwise that's going to be more important than me investing in my kids, because the only way any of us are ever going to change the world is to be the change we want to see, and invest in your children and have a bunch of kids and raise them right, and they'll take care of the rest. But everything is so instant gratification and me. Even as adults, we're selfish, and it's all about what we want. But, you know, I would say that it's been the greatest privilege of my life to be a father.
One of my favorite quotes, and all faith aside, right? It could span any belief system, but it's one of my favorites, and I lived by it, and I hope it made a difference. But it was, your greatest impact on the world may not be something you do, but someone you raise. And that was how I chose to parent. And I dare say he is a kind, caring, strong young man, and I couldn't be prouder of Andrew. He's a very good kid, and he's quite tall too, so I look up to him.
And also not a kid anymore, but they will
Not a
always be
kid.
kids to us.
He
I
will
know.
he'll be 21 this year, and
I say, and I'm using air quotes, I say the boys all the time, but they're 22 and 18 now. So,
Yep.
but they'll always
Yeah.
be the boys to me. Well, listen, that is a good note to wrap up on, people. You know, we got a little, I don't know, off track, but I think message is still well received. Crystal, I appreciate you being on today and just sharing a little bit. How do they connect with you, find out more about you, other than what I've already put out on social while we were recording?
Yeah, so probably the fastest way is just go to the pemgroup.com. If you click on contact, it actually pulls up my personal calendar. And I also have some really good blogs over there that talk about outsourcing to a bookkeeper, what you need to ask. It's a robust post about that. Highly encourage you to read that. But yeah, get on my calendar, and I'd love to chat.
And if you're driving when you listen to this or on a treadmill, don't worry about writing it down. It'll all be in the show notes, and I'll make it very, very easy for you to connect with Crystal. So with that, we're going to wrap up. I really appreciate you taking time to be on today, Crystal, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last. So
Yeah, it's a
thank you for
pleasure.
everything that you do for me personally, and I look forward to watching you continue to serve the Killing commercial community for a long time.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, we'll catch you next time. See you.